Why does reality seem to always return to the same place, even after so much effort? We change habits, read books, try to motivate ourselves, create new goals. For a while, it feels like something is shifting, but soon, the old emotional routine returns. The same situations repeat, the same outcomes as if something is pulling us back to the same point. This isn't bad luck or coincidence. There's a mechanism silently operating behind our experience, something that isn't visible, but that defines much of what we call reality. That mechanism is the subconscious. And what few realize is that the subconscious doesn't just store thoughts and memories. It interacts with reality itself. It emits signals, vibrations, and connects to what physics calls the quantum field. But there's a deeper layer to this phenomenon. Science has discovered that two particles, even when separated by great distances, can remain connected, behaving as if they were one. A change in one instantly affects the other. This phenomenon is called quantum entanglement. But does this only happen with microscopic particles? What if the same logic is at work inside you, between your mind and the realities you experience? And if this happens inside you, perhaps the reason why you keep manifesting the same patterns is not just psychological, but energetic. The reality we live in today is not just the result of our actions, but a direct result of what our mind is entangled with. So let's explore this connection deeply. Let's understand how quantum entanglement can explain why so many of us live in repetitive cycles, experiencing the same reality even when we intend to change. And more than that, how this connection can be realigned so that reality stops being a loop and becomes an open field of new possibilities. Because understanding what's behind the reality you keep manifesting is the first step to finally breaking the loop. There are moments when life feels like it moves in circles. The outer appearance may change, new people, situations, maybe even new places. But deep down, the feeling is the same, as if the scenery is different but the story is identical. Have you ever felt like you were reliving the same day, even when everything around you seemed different? That impression isn't just emotional. It has a concrete basis in how the human mind works. Most of the decisions we make, the emotions we feel, and the way we interpret reality don't come from our conscious mind. They're processed by a part of the mind that acts without our direct permission, the subconscious. While the conscious mind says it wants to change, evolve, or manifest something new, the subconscious keeps running the same programs. And that happens because it was shaped by past experiences and believes that repeating those patterns is a way to keep us safe. Even if that safety means living in conflict, scarcity, or repetition. The subconscious mind operates like an automatic system. It doesn't decide what's good or bad, it just repeats what it learned. And the more those repetitions happen, the stronger they become. A recurring thought, a sustained emotion, an internalized belief. All of it turns into a circuit, a neurological pathway reinforced every day. And that's when the cycle takes hold. We live the same pattern, feel the same emotions, reinforce the same beliefs, and return to living the same pattern. This happens with relationships, finances, health, self-esteem. Not because we choose it, but because that repetition became the path of least resistance for our mind. What's curious is that, since this process is silent, many people don't even realize they're stuck in it. The person believes they're trying to change, and consciously they are, but they don't understand why the results stay the same. The effort feels big, but the transformation, minimal. And this creates frustration, doubt, even disbelief in oneself or in one's dreams. But most of the time, the problem isn't the conscious desire to change. The problem is the system that automatically recreates reality every day, based on what has already been programmed. And that system doesn't respond to willpower. It responds to something much more subtle, yet infinitely more powerful. This is where we reach a fundamental point for understanding why reality doesn't change, even when there's an intention for internal change. If the reality around you always seems to organize itself in the same way, the explanation isn't just in your thoughts, but in the energy those thoughts carry. And more importantly, in the frequency your subconscious emits continuously, even without your conscious awareness. The subconscious mind isn't just a storage place for old memories. It's a living system of energetic patterns that operates in the background, directly influencing how you feel, react, perceive, and interact with the world. But more than that, it works like a constant signal emitter, like an antenna transmitting a specific vibration into the field around you. And that emission isn't metaphorical. Our brain generates electromagnetic waves, and our body emotionally responds to each memory, thought, and stored belief. Together, these signals create a dominant frequency, a vibrational tone that is interpreted, according to quantum physics, as information that interacts with the quantum field. You might be saying to yourself, "I want something new." But if your subconscious is tuned into scarcity, fear, guilt, or limitation, what's being sent to the field is exactly that. The dominant vibration overrides the superficial intention, because the quantum field doesn't respond to what you say. It responds to what you are, energetically, emotionally, internally. That's why so many people feel like they're trying hard but not moving forward. They're trying to use the conscious mind to create something new, while the frequency vibrating in their field remains tied to the old. And the more that frequency is sustained, the more the subconscious reinforces familiar paths, because to it, the new is uncertain and the old is predictable. The most challenging part is that this process doesn't require our attention. It happens automatically, every day. Upon waking, many people resume the same thoughts, relive the same emotions, enter the same mental mode, and don't even realize they're transmitting the same signal as always, attracting similar experiences. And like any energy system, what is consistently maintained tends to stabilize. Our frequency becomes a vibrational signature, and it's that signature that the quantum field reads, responds to, and organizes. But to understand how this frequency influences reality on an even deeper level, we need to observe a principle that quantum mechanics often discusses: quantum entanglement. When we talk about quantum entanglement, many people think of a concept that is completely distant from everyday life. But the truth is that this phenomenon, although it has been identified in the microscopic world of particles, reveals something much deeper about the very structure of reality, including that which each of us lives every day. In quantum physics, entanglement is the name given to a peculiar behavior. Two particles, once connected, continue to influence each other even when they're separated by great distances. They react in a coordinated, instant way, as if they were still part of the same system, even when they're light years apart. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance because it completely challenged the linear logic of traditional physics. This connection isn't mediated by visible signals and doesn't depend on time or space. It's as if, at some level, those particles were never really separated. The matter that makes up everything in the universe, including you, is subject to this kind of connection, and it doesn't stop at the subatomic world. The same principle can be seen in more complex systems like the human mind and its subconscious patterns. The subconscious mind creates energetic links with patterns of reality that vibrate at the same frequency as the internal content. When a certain emotional and mental configuration is sustained long enough, it connects with specific possibilities within the quantum field. This energetic connection works like entanglement. The reality that keeps repeating isn't just being created by you. It's also being maintained by an active connection with what is already rooted inside you. And until that link is transformed, the field will keep mirroring the same structure, even if your conscious desire says otherwise. In this scenario, the manifestation of reality is no longer an act of creation, but an energetic response. Because the quantum field isn't waiting for you to want something new. It's simply responding to the signal you're already emitting, to the link already in place. And since quantum entanglement isn't undone by distance or superficial effort, what's active in you will keep operating until there's a real shift in the source of the emission, your inner state. That's why isolated positive thoughts, affirmations, or repeated desires rarely generate consistent transformation. Because what shapes experience isn't what we say out loud, but what we vibrate from within. This is the root of so many repetitive cycles. As long as the energetic connection to the old pattern remains intact and active, the entanglement will stay active. And if that connection isn't broken or redirected, the field will continue shaping reality according to it. But what exactly is entangled? What is the content that maintains this link between us and the reality that keeps repeating? The answer lies in something most people rarely observe deeply: the emotional and energetic content of the subconscious. What keeps the reality loop active is not just a pattern of behavior, but an active energetic connection between our internal state and the surrounding field. And this connection is maintained precisely by the emotional and vibrational configuration that inhabits our subconscious. So we're not just living a reality, we're connected to it on a deep level. The way we feel regularly, the emotions we no longer notice because they've become normal, the thoughts that arise automatically when we wake up, all of it composes the dominant frequency our subconscious emits. That frequency is what forms the bond with your current reality. And it's not just reactive, but participatory. The subconscious, by repeating the same internal state day after day, stays entangled with the same line of reality, one that maintains the same types of results, the same limitations, and the same emotional patterns as always. The conscious mind might try to change. It sets goals, feels inspired, imagines new possibilities. But behind all that, the unconscious system keeps feeding the same core energy. And that core is what communicates with the quantum field. What hasn't been transformed internally continues to be repeated externally, not as punishment, but through compatibility. It's the energetic compatibility that keeps the bond alive. Even when the intention is positive, if it's built on an internal structure of scarcity, lack, or insecurity, what will manifest will inevitably be an extension of that. The field doesn't distinguish between intention and frequency. It responds to vibrational coherence, and coherence is determined by the deepest part of your mind, the subconscious. That's why, for real change to happen, it's not enough to shift the goal, the affirmation, or the desire. You have to change the frequency field from which your reality is arising. And that's only possible when you understand the depth of the subconscious's influence and the role attention and observation play in shaping reality. The idea that reality responds to your inner state is supported not only by spirituality, but also by one of the best-known experiments in quantum physics, the double-slit experiment. In this experiment, particles like electrons were shot toward a barrier with two slits. When no measurement was taken, the electrons behaved like waves, passing through both slits simultaneously and forming an interference pattern, as if they existed in multiple possibilities. However, when scientists installed equipment to observe which slit each particle passed through, the behavior changed. The particles stopped acting like waves and behaved like solid matter, passing through only one slit. The simple act of observation was enough to collapse the field of possibilities into a single result. So the consciousness of the observer alters the result of the experiment. In other words, reality at the quantum level is not something fixed. It adjusts in response to the act of observing. Bringing this into human experience, the principle remains the same. When you become conscious of something, a pattern, an emotional state, or a belief, that act of observation alters the way it behaves in you. Mindfulness in itself is a transformative factor because it breaks down automatic repetition and opens up space for new possibilities to be accessed. But there's an even subtler detail. What we observe with greater consistency, what we sustain emotionally and energetically, tends to solidify in our lives. The quantum field responds not only to the presence of consciousness, but to the coherence between what is felt, thought, and maintained with focus. When you observe life with emotions that reinforce scarcity, fear, or conflict, you're collapsing possibilities that match that state. Even if you want something better, your consciousness keeps validating what already exists. On the other hand, when observation is accompanied by new inner states, such as trust, gratitude, and clarity, the field begins to reorganize from those states. This brings us to a crucial point. Manifestation doesn't depend only on intention, but on the coherence between what you observe, feel, and emit. And this is where many get lost, believing that the desire for change is enough, when in truth, reality responds to the real frequency, not the declared intention. So, what you observe with emotional involvement, what you sustain with attention and repeat internally, starts to gain more density in the field. It's not isolated intention that influences reality, but the vibrational consistency of what you're holding within while you observe. This becomes clear when we understand the difference between wanting something and being in coherence with what you want. The conscious mind may clearly affirm, I want to prosper. I want to change my life. I want to live a new cycle. But if the subconscious structure is still linked to the opposite of that, the frequency emitted will continue to be the same as before. And the quantum field will respond to that, not to the desire, but to the dominant vibration that remains active. What makes manifestation ineffective for many people is exactly this dissonance between intention and frequency. They want a new reality but still feel emotionally tied to the old. They keep feeding memories, resentments, and emotional patterns that sustain what they're trying to move beyond. And in this scenario, the field doesn't shift, because it doesn't react to the intellectual content of the thought. It reacts to the energy the thought carries. It's like trying to change the direction of a wave without changing the vibration that created it. The movement of reality follows the energetic root that generated it. And if the root stays the same, the flow continues along the same path. Many frustrations with manifestation arise for exactly this reason. A person claims they're ready for the new, but emotionally still lives in the old. And since the subconscious maintains the primary emission, it remains entangled with the reality it already knows, the one reinforced repeatedly over time. Without coherent frequency, intention loses power. Without compatible energy, it doesn't hold. And without an emotional base that supports the desire, it has no structure to manifest. That's why, instead of focusing only on what you want to achieve, it's necessary to observe what's still sustaining your current reality. Because transformation doesn't begin in the projection of the future, it begins in the internal reconfiguration of the present. Once conscious intention is stripped of coherent frequency, what remains is the automatic pattern the subconscious already knows, and it's exactly that pattern that ends up recreating the same results over and over again. The subconscious responds to what's emotionally charged, to what has been repeated with intensity. And because of that, it tends to reproduce in the present what has been consolidated as internal reference. The cycle continues because emotional content feeds the mental pattern, and the mental pattern reinforces the emotion. This loop turns into an energetic structure that keeps the quantum field collapsing possibilities compatible with that state. And the more this loop repeats, the more familiar it becomes. The mind begins to accept that frequency as normal, even if it's linked to pain, scarcity, or repetition. This causes many people to confuse familiarity with truth. They believe they're living an unchangeable reality when in fact they're unconsciously repeating the same connections with the field. Repetition is not proof of destiny. It's a sign of conditioning, and that's what turns the subconscious into the main agent of the continuous manifestation of the past. Because unless there's a break in the vibrational base, the future will be just a variation of what already was. There's no leap, no detour, only automatic continuity. This continuity, however, can be interrupted. But that interruption requires a deeper internal movement, the deconditioning of the identity that keeps the loop running. No external change is sustainable if the internal identity remains the same. No matter how much you change environments, plans, or language, reality will always find a way to reorganize itself based on the content of the mind projecting it. And that content is often rooted in an identity formed not by conscious choice, but by conditioning accumulated over life. This identity shows up in recurring thoughts, automatic emotional reactions, judgments that arise without warning. It hides in the certainties about who you are, what you deserve, what's possible or out of reach. Subconscious reprogramming begins when this identity is put under observation, not as something to be fixed, but as a pattern to be recognized. Before trying to create a new version of yourself, you need to clearly see who this current version is that keeps recreating the same reality, and that takes pause, presence, and silence. The process isn't about forcing a change from the outside in, but about interrupting, even for a moment, the automatic flow of thoughts and emotions sustaining the old identity. That interruption doesn't happen through willpower, but through awareness. Dissolving the old identity doesn't mean erasing the past. It means stopping using it as the absolute parameter for perceiving the present. It means no longer identifying with the same roles, the same narratives, the same limitations that once felt like part of who you were. But for that to happen, you must allow the emptying. And you can't fill a new field of possibilities if the mind is still full of old certainties. Reprogramming begins when there's space for the new to enter. But that space only opens when the old is released, not with struggle, but with clarity. From the moment the old identity begins to dissolve, a new field of reality can be accessed. But it's not about imagining an ideal future or feeding superficial desires. What matters here is the frequency you begin to operate with, because it's that frequency that creates the new bond with the quantum field. The future reality you desire already exists in the field of infinite possibilities. It doesn't need to be created from scratch, but accessed. And access doesn't happen through effort. It happens through resonance. The field can only collapse a new possibility when there's energetic coherence between you and what you want to experience. This realignment is an inner state that starts to build when you genuinely feel the emotions associated with the future you desire, not as a distant wish, but as a state already present, even if it hasn't yet manifested externally. The mind can imagine, but the body needs to believe, because the subconscious responds to emotion, not ideas. When you begin to feel the vibration of what you want, like peace, clarity, prosperity, lightness, those emotions start to replace the old circuits. And over time, they become more familiar than the states that once seemed normal. This is the point where manifestation stops being a wish and becomes a reality under construction. And when this vibrational alignment becomes constant, the entanglement with the old pattern weakens, while a new energetic bond starts to form. This process is gradual, but it has a direct impact on how you move in the world. Little by little, your perception changes, your behavior changes, your choices change, and most importantly, the frequency you emit changes. And with that, The kind of experience that starts to show up in your life also begins to transform. As a result, manifestation becomes a practical consequence of a new internal state, a reflection of what has become dominant within you. In any real change process, it's essential to understand the role the body plays in this dynamic. More than a set of organs, the body is where emotional patterns settle and repeat. It records lived experiences, conditions automatic reactions, and directly influences how you respond to reality. Each recurring emotion creates a kind of physical memory. Anxiety, for example, can become a constant bodily state. Anger, frustration, or discouragement also leave marks that turn into habitual impulses. Over time, these emotions stop feeling temporary and become the way we feel most of the time, even without an apparent reason. It's precisely this continuous emotional state that reinforces the frequency with which we keep connected to the field around us. The body starts to operate like a transmitter, consistently maintaining the same vibration day after day. And as we've seen before, the field doesn't respond to sporadic intention, but to what is maintained with consistency. So your habitual emotional state sets the reference for how the field organizes around you. When the body is stuck in recurring negative emotions, it sustains a limited reality. Even if the conscious mind tries to think positively, the body remains tied to past experiences, and that link directly interferes with our ability to change. The new seems distant not because it's inaccessible, but because the emotional system is still committed to the old pattern. On the other hand, when you start developing familiarity with more regulated states, like calm, presence, clarity, our body begins to respond differently. The chemistry changes. The automatic reaction loses strength, and gradually, the body starts to recognize that there are other possible paths beyond old emotional circuits. This transition starts with the conscious recognition of how you habitually feel. Change happens when you stop reacting automatically and begin to sustain new responses. As the body adapts to these new states, it begins to send new information to the field, and that changes how reality begins to manifest. Consciously connecting to a new reality means, above all, consistently choosing the kind of presence you want to embody in the world. This involves more lucidly to recognize the automatic thoughts that reinforce the old pattern and learning not to react based on them. It means creating enough internal space to realize you don't have to respond the same way you always have. As this new way of being stabilizes, external reality also starts to reorganize. Decisions change. Daily choices begin to reflect a different kind of awareness. And over time, what once seemed distant stops being just an imagined possibility and becomes a reflection of what is already operating within you. This process requires consistency, but not forced effort. When the new identity begins to establish itself naturally, you no longer need to remember what you want to manifest. Your system is already functioning according to this new reference. That's the point where the bond with the old pattern dissolves, not because it was fought, but because it lost space. The new reality begins to become viable, not because something magical happened, but because your pattern of interaction with the field has changed. Your relationship with what you feel, think, and do has stopped reproducing the past. And when that happens in a sustained way, the field responds differently, more precisely, more coherently, more compatible with who you're truly becoming. In the end, manifestation is not an effort to create something that doesn't yet exist. It's a process of reconnecting with what's already available, but that can only become real when you become compatible with it. That compatibility begins with a quiet decision, an internal shift in posture, and each time you sustain it, the cycle breaks a little more. Thank you for embarking on this journey with me. If this video resonated with you, I invite you to like and subscribe to our channel. Share this video with others so they can benefit from this message. And don't forget to leave a comment below sharing your thoughts, reflections, and experiences. Thanks again for watching and for joining me. Take care and see you soon.